Beth, what was your last name again? Well, it's now 10:30 and time for brainstorming the human connection. My name is Lawrence Diggs, and I will be your host on this program. But right at the top, I want to remind you that this is an interactive program. Uh, what that means is we're looking for you to participate and ask questions, give your insights, be an equal partner, so to speak, in a discussion, because that's where we can actually get more ideas than a couple talking heads bantering about. We want to bring include everybody, as many people as possible in this conversation. I will say also that if you look in the chat, we will be putting in some links and information, some questions that you might ask or that you might be thinking about, because if you have some questions in mind as we go through this discussion, there will probably be other questions that will pop up, or it will help you to listen because you have some questions. Well, what about this? What about that? And then as our guests talk about those things, then they will stick better. So even though our title seems like it's about Chislic and sunflowers, today's conversation is actually going to go a lot deeper than that, because probably you know what meat tastes like, and you know what sunflowers look like. So those things are important, and they provide a let's say a framework and a platform and a forum for us to talk about today's subject. But actually what we're going to be talking about is getting communities to work together. These people, when you're putting on a festival in a small town, there's a lot of bumps in the road, and there's and they don't have to be catastrophic, but it's not easy to put these festivals on. I actually have experience with that, with our International Vinegar Festival. So even when you have willing and passionate people, there's still things to navigate and negotiate in terms of just getting things done, and managing people's ideas, so everybody's ideas gets a fair hearing and a fair trial, and giving people an opportunity to bring their particular talents, whatever that is, to bear, and getting people to feel actually a part of whatever you're doing. Those are not the easiest things to do, And so we're going to be talking today with a couple of folks who have actual experience doing that. Jeremy and Beth are going to be joining us today, and Jeremy is with the Chislic Festival, and Beth is with the Sunflower Festival, and we're going to be talking to them about how they actually put things like this together. So welcome, Jeremy and Beth.
Awesome. Thanks, Lawrence. Appreciate you having us today.
Yes. Beth, is your phone working now?
Yeah, I can at least talk. I still don't have video, but yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure, and we know you're there.
Yes.
That's the important thing. So let's start off with Beth. You can start. Tell us who you are and give us your kind of elevator speech for your background. Who is Beth?
Well, I'm Beth Simonson from Highmore, South Dakota. I've lived in South Dakota all my life. I actually grew up in Scotland, South Dakota, which is actually closer to Freeman. But I actually did not always love sunflowers until I moved to central South Dakota, which is where Highmore is. And probably about 6 years ago, I had this idea that maybe we should have a sunflower festival, and I wasn't really sure how to make that happen. And so it kind of has been a dream of mine for a long time, and a work in progress to kind of build it up. So I've worked with Travel South Dakota to kind of help along the way.
Okay. Now, is this your first festival that you tried to put on, or did
Yes,
you?
yeah, this is the first year. We did do a smaller, last year we did a photography workshop event focused on sunflowers and farming, and that in August, and that went really well. So that was kind of the precursor.
Okay, so it's actually the same festival, but with a different iteration. It's like it's
kind of, yeah.
Okay. So you don't now have two festivals. That other festival grew into this one.
Well, actually, there hasn't been a festival yet.
Oh,
we
okay.
haven't done.
Okay,
this is our very first year. It's just been a dream until this year. We're actually doing it this year.
Okay. So unlike Chislic, you're fresh meat.
Yes. We are in the unknown of how this is actually going to happen. We're hoping people come. So
okay.
Yeah.
So congratulations to you for bringing your courage together and bringing the forces together to actually do something. We'll get back to that, because I think those starting points are critical, and they're very important. And that's usually where people don't do something, is they don't take the first step, and they don't act on the things that they have a passion for, but life gets in the way. Let's go over to Jeremy now. And Jeremy, can you give us your elevator speech and tell us a little bit about what the Chislic Festival is about?
Sure, absolutely. First thing I want to clarify, though, is our Chislic is fresh meat as well. Maybe not in the first year of that actual festival, but so a little bit older than the Sunflower Festival. We're actually in our 6th festival this year. In 7 years. We unfortunately had to cancel the 2020 festival because we had this thing called COVID that was sweeping through our state, and wanted to make sure that everybody was absolutely as safe as possible. So we're going into our 6th year, but we're still learning and growing and changing. Back in 2018, the South Dakota legislature declared Chislic the official state nosh that actually was passed into codified law, and so now it is the official snack of the states. And a group in the area of Freeman, I said the greater Freeman area, because we talk about the Chislic Circle really being rooted in Freeman, but it kind of extends, at least in the beginning, around 30 miles or so outside of Freeman. So that would include Beth's hometown of Scotland, actually, be part of the Chislic Circle. But now we're growing, we hear reports of 50 miles out, 80 miles out. Just as Chislic becomes much more well-known and celebrated, we're kind of gathering more people into that heritage and culture of Chislic. So our festival is not only about, giving people tasty snacks in Chislic, and all kinds of other food vendors. We have lots of non-food vendors on site as well, selling quite the variety of wares. But more importantly, we're also focused on the culture and heritage, just of what Chislic was when it came to the area. That would be Shashlik, brought from the Germans from Russia that came over, which we can get to a little bit later. So we do have education on site with one of our board members dressed in period regalia that will actually tell you all about the history of Chislic. So not only, come hungry, but also come hungry to learn as well, just about our region.
So tell us a little bit about the cultural connection between your community and Chislic. Tell us about the history coming forward to the festival.
Absolutely. Food is always connected to culture, right? And that is just something that people celebrate as they get back to their roots. And so when we look at immigration to this area of South Dakota, There was a group of Germans that had settled in Russia that, again, experienced a lot of distress in that region, relocated to the Americas, migrated here to South Dakota, and really were some of the first pioneers in the area that set up roots. As you're establishing your culture, you also establish food. And so what they brought with them was this dish called shashlik. And now, if you're familiar with Chislic now, it's traditionally stuck on a skewer, somewhere around 6-ish pieces of Chislic on each stick. These chunks of meat that were shashlik were a good 2 by 2 by 2 inch cubes. They were fairly almost like little mini steaks on their skewers that they were using. And so as meat became short, as culture kind of drifted and merged with more people kind of closer in the area, that kind of shrunk down, changed a little bit, but we still celebrate it quite a bit in the Freeman area. Now, again, I'm not from Freeman. I'm actually a transplant to South Dakota. Beth mentioned that she grew up in South Dakota and relocated to Highmore. I'm more from the Indiana, Kentucky area of the U.S. and moved up here about 10 years ago. I had no idea what Chislic was when I first moved. When someone described it to me, I actually was like, "Oh, you mean like steak tips?" And I was met with a lot of frowns, and then received education myself on what Chislic actually is. So, yeah, it very much is just culture. When I think of hearing some of the stories of some of my other board members that I work with, that's just a staple at family get-togethers. That's a staple at celebrations. Graduations that just happened from high school. I know a couple of our board members went to those, and they had Chislic served at that region. So it definitely weaves its way into every piece of life in Southwest South Dakota.
What is the cut of meat that the Chislic comes from, or is that probably can't buy that in a boxed beef program, but
probably not. Yeah.
Yeah. So what cut?
So it's traditionally lamb, is where Chislic comes from. As far as the exact cut of meat, I'm gonna have to think about that for a second because that takes me back a few years when I first learned. But yeah, it's traditionally lamb. Mutton is also part of Chislic as well. So again, where I was like steak tips, where that comes from cow. No. This is definitely traditionally lamb. Again, traditionally skewered, also fried, and then served with garlic salt and crackers, saltine crackers. So that also has kind of evolved over time. If you come to Sioux Falls and get Chislic in restaurants, quite often it's just served in a boat without the skewer. But our booth at the festival still does it stuck in the traditional way because we believe that history connection is important.
And you're still doing lamb?
We're still doing lamb. We actually have lamb and mutton both. I will say that lamb is generally a little more popular, just because lamb is a little bit more tender than mutton is.
Sure. Interesting, because South Dakota and the sheep farmers, that's a thing.
Exactly.
Beef and sheep farmers. Yeah. Well, quite a few let's say controversies. Okay, so back to Beth. Beth, tell us something about sunflowers. Why sunflowers? Jeremy was talking about how Chislic is like a cultural thing that's brought forth. Other than, why not sunflowers? One can ask about that too. But why did you choose sunflowers?
Well, I'm going to talk to when I lived down by Scotland, and I really did not like sunflowers. I didn't understand it myself until I moved to central South Dakota. And I lived in Highmore, and I was driving back and forth to Pierre to work. And in August, the fields started turning yellow, and they're huge fields. And it's just it's an undescribable beauty to see this field that is so big and so yellow and bright, and it just is an amazing sight that people should see and take it in, because it's not what you think it is. And I just fell in love with it, and I think it should be shared, and we should take advantage of it, and share it with people. We have a bed and breakfast that we've ran for almost 10 years, and I just am like, how can we get people to come to our area? And you start talking about sunflowers, and people go, oh, sunflowers, and they just get, and to share that and to educate people about agriculture in our area is important. And
right.
it is Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I cut you off.
I mean, it's just we need to share what agriculture is. It's not just the sunflowers, but that's the one crop that people are just like in awe of because they're of their beauty. You know,
Mhm.
you can look at a cornfield. In some ways, there is some beauty to corn and a wheat field, but a sunflower field is a whole. They have their beauty for a lot, just a short period of time, and then they're not so beautiful. But it's just educating people on what sunflowers are and what you get from sunflowers.
Right.
You know, there's
So do you have like exhibits or people talking about all of the products that we get, you know, from sunflowers? Usually we think of sunflower just as cooking oil or something like that. But
right,
you know, yeah, I've lived in areas where people have a lot of sunflowers and they have many products, you know, from dyes to, you know, all kinds of stuff, lipstick, you know, all kinds of stuff that they use it for.
right.
So do you guys cover that in your festival?
Well, that's what we're hoping to, and we do
Okay.
have one of our sponsors is Sunbird over in Huron, and
Mm,
hopefully they will have a booth. Like I
okay.
said, this is our first year, and we're still trying to get people to, you know, if you want to have a booth, you could have a booth at the Sunflower Festival, and you know,
Sure. Sure.
but we're planning to have it mapped so that people know where to find these fields. Over in Harold, there's a sunflower plant that people can do a tour of a sunflower production plant. I believe they do birdseed there. I haven't actually been in the plant. So
Okay.
there's just different things that they can do in the area.
Okay.
And yeah.
Sure. Well, let's turn now to what I feel is the real subject here, and that is getting something like this started. Uh, what does it take? You know, like who are the players? What kind of things? Like, I want to get under the hood of like we've got two festivals here. Both of them are new, and we just had our 25th. We're doing our 25th anniversary of the Vinegar Festival. So it, it, I can appreciate that it's not an easy path. Tell us about just getting started. You want to start, Jeremy?
Yeah, it's always a challenge to get a group of people together because especially in a community in small town South Dakota, even though it's small towns, people have big views about what things should be and how they should be run. You know, when the first festival happened in Freeman back in 2018, and again, I was not part of the first festival. I wasn't actually even part of the second festival, but I provided really good feedback on Facebook, and then got invited to the board because of that feedback. So I'm just happy to be around for the next four. But when it first started, they hosted it in the Freeman City Park that was pretty close to downtown, just with the thought that people could walk to downtown and explore all the shops in downtown Freeman if they wanted to. They were expecting around 2,000 people to show up from the Chislic Circle region, and instead they had closer to 7 to 8,000 people show up. And so, just thinking about the logistics of how you have vendors packed around the city baseball field,
Mm-hmm.
with lines going every single which way. There was a lot of displeasure from within the city of Freeman, but also hope that hey, this actually is a pretty big deal. This reached Sioux Falls, this reached Yankton, this reached Mitchell, this reached some of the bigger cities that are around Freeman, and so we might have something here. That
Mm-hmm.
took then a lot of work over the next 10 months to move it to a larger space within Freeman, figure out better ways to contract services, even just golf carts now to drive around in bigger things you wouldn't even think about, of number of porta potties that we have to have, and more specifically, where those go so that they can actually be used appropriately and are not just wasting resources or having overuse of other resources in certain areas. And so getting all of that figured out, as I mentioned at the top, I'm pretty sure that we're still learning some of those things in our sixth annual festival and still making some of those tweaks. So it's definitely a lot of work, and I'm sure Beth can attest that it takes a group of volunteers on that board that share the same passion and share the same growth for education and drive, because there are times where I'm up pretty late working through vendor emails or working through sponsor requests just to make sure that our festival can happen and people can really enjoy what we put on.
Well, those are very interesting insights.
Mhm.
I would like to turn to like, what kind of conversations did you have to, you discovered, or it was sort of stuck in your eye that you had some growth problems, and they were, it was good problems to have.
Right.
But when you have a community who's never experienced that and everybody's learning at the same time, can you talk about like how you dealt with people learning to work together, especially when you're still forming what the thing is?
Yeah, I mean that's always the hard part, right? Is when people are like, well, what is the festival? I can tell you what that was. If you were to ask me year two, oh, you're right, Lawrence. We were still trying to figure out what our focus was. It was a celebration of what the state brought forward, but yeah, we were still learning ourselves. I think those conversations really have to occur at every single level within the city, and especially your key stakeholders within those cities. Because if you really want to bring a festival to Freeman, South Dakota, but you don't have the support of the city police or the city government, or even the big movers and shakers of businesses within the city of Freeman, it's simply not going to get off the ground. Right? I mean, every festival requires some startup funding to happen. And we are very grateful for our sponsors for the Chislic Festival, especially those who have been with us from the beginning, because they saw the importance and recognized the importance of bringing people to Freeman to experience that culture. But even trying to get more sponsors and asking small businesses that are like, hey, I know that you're also barely making it, but can you give us $100? Can you give us $50 just to get the festival off the ground? Developing those relationships is key. And actually, even in our early board meetings, as we're, we always have our festival the last Saturday of July every single year. So it's July 27th this year down in Freeman. We kind of take August just to calm down from all the festival chaos. But as we're starting back in September, October, November, and discussing who's going to help us with this festival, who we need to get on our board, who we need to bring in from our host locations so that we make sure that dialogue is clear. Did we make sure that we went to the appropriate city council meetings so that we could get waivers from, crowd sizes? Because, I mean, Freeman has limits on group sizes that can be in places without having security on site. And yeah, we need that waiver. And so making sure that we have a good relationship with our city police is extremely key. We have to have somebody to volunteer. And I mean, naturally, we're expecting 8,000 people on site this year. We get between 8 to 10,000 people every year. So if we're expecting 8 to 10,000 people on site, our little board of 7 to 8 people can't really do all of those spots. We can't run a Chislic booth. We do serve alcohol at our festival. And so we can't, serve that with just the 8 of us. We have soda stations, we have trash needs to be picked up. You have to make those relationships with volunteers in our area as well. And sometimes those relationships, even as we're going through our funding conversations in the fall, it's like, hey, we need to reach out to so-and-so. And someone's like, oh yeah, I know them, they're my neighbor. Or, oh yeah, I talked to them last year and we had a good relationship. And that building those connections is really what gets a festival off the ground. Right? If you don't have those relationships or connections, it's simply not going to work.
We're going to come back to that, but I want to bring Beth back into this conversation. And Beth, you're just now getting started. What are some of the things that you're let's say are running up against, some of the problems that you have to solve or are in the process of solving? Maybe we could solve some of them here. We got Jeremy, and he's been here doing some stuff. So tell us about where you're at and what you're up against.
I mean, we don't have food really involved, because I think food is a huge draw that people are going to come for food. I would come to, if I lived closer to Freeman, I would have been there the first year for Chislic. Because I go every year to Huron for Chislic, just because it's from back home. It's Chislic up here is different. But anyway, so just to get, we are in the very beginning and it's unknown. It's unknown who will come for sunflowers. So we don't know that it's how huge it's going to be or how small it's going to be. So that unknown. And I don't think people in our community understand that people will come just for sunflowers. So there's that. And so creating those conversations and convincing people that, hey, we have a hidden gem here, that people will come to our community and are coming to our community to view sunflowers.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You can go ahead and ask the question.
Oh, no, I was just going to add a comment, actually. Speaking of sunflowers, Betty Sheldon has done she's a painter, and she's done a series on sunflowers. You guys should have her to bring her up as a center to do paintings or to show her paintings. She would fit right in. She's kind of a sunflower anyway, but she actually paints sunflowers. That was just, I was just going to add that as a tip as you're trying to build
Right.
your draw, so to speak, to your festival.
And that's kind of, because like I said, this has been a dream for years, but I knew I had to kind of build things. So I kind of have worked with the traveled to South Dakota, just so they knew that we are very interested in people coming to South Dakota for sunflowers. So I built that relationship first. And so there's been different articles, like a few years ago, we were mentioned in a article to do with the pioneer woman, just to bring in that relationship. But I also have to educate our locals and have those conversations and try and get everybody on board. And like you said, it's unknown. So I don't know what this year is going to be.
I think you bring up a
So
very good point though, Betty. When we were thinking about our first year for the festival, as I said, we were expecting that people weren't going to drive 45 minutes from Sioux Falls to come to Freeman. Like, why would anybody do that? And then we
right,
had 4 times the number of people show up that were actually there. I think that educated the community pretty well. When they were like,
right.
"Oh, like festival, like, well, I mean, okay, that's cool. We like Chislic, we'll come." But then seeing the massive influx of people, that caught on and actually served as a pretty strong education piece for the greater Freeman area. So I'm hopeful that that's the case in Highmore this year too.
But I
That's
would
what I'm,
also
yeah,
go ahead.
that
Go ahead. Beth.
that's what I'm hoping, is that I know that people are interested in sunflowers. I know that the state of South Dakota, the Travel South Dakota, knows that they are, because they gave us the TAP grant for marketing, and we've been marketing that. It's just my community doesn't understand it. So getting them educated. So I think this year could be a huge education to them. So
So
it's
we
not,
have go ahead,
go
Beth.
ahead.
We have a couple of questions in the chat, and one of them is: are either of your events part of the 501c3 nonprofit organization that would be eligible for grants?
And so
Mine is,
like that. I'm sorry.
actually, we are, just because it's we're running it through our arts council, and we are a 501c3, and that's how we got the TAP grant from the state of South Dakota. So we already have gotten a grant. So yes, we do.
Okay.
And I can say yes for about a month. We've been a 501c3. So we had applied for it back, I think, third or fourth year of the festival. And there were just some concerns that our document wasn't written in such a way that we really emphasize the education that our festival provides. And the fact that, at the end of every year, we of course hold back funds to make sure that our next year festival is fully funded. It can happen if we were to get no sponsors, but anything extra that we have is actually gifted to community organizations that align with our mission of that education and growing culture in South Dakota, especially those that help us during the festival as well. We can kind of offer them some assistance as a form of payment, unofficially. But yeah, we've now become a 501c3, so we're actually looking very forward to being able to apply for some of those larger grants last year, because it has been really reliant on local businesses just in the region to help our festival get off the ground year after year.
Well, there's another question, and that gets to how you're promoting it. I think this one's directed at Beth too. Looks like you have more people who want to help you. What are you doing in terms of like promotion? And do you have a social media? Do you have a Facebook page? Or because this person says, Trish, I think it was, that said, well, they tried to search you, but they couldn't find anything about your festival. What kind of ways are you promoting your festival, Beth?
We are on our Highmore SD.org on our Highmore, South Dakota website, and we will be putting more stuff on our Facebook on our under our Highmore Area Council of the Arts Facebook page is where it's at, and there will be more coming. So yes.
Okay, so you're
And
just kind of getting started with your promotion too.
To some degree. We have had it in the South Dakota Magazine, and it is on Missouri River's travel tourism page. So there is some stuff there also for tourists, like if they look on Missouri River's tourism page, it's there. And like I said, we have been in the South Dakota Magazine 3 times. There was a little article about this from last year's Sunflower Fest or workshop. So there's been a little bit there, and there'll be more on Facebook coming up.
Okay. So that brings us to, I want to open it up more to the other esteemed panelists here. Anybody else have any questions, comments, ridicule, you know? Betty, Miss Sunflower herself.
I'm in the shade and in the dark a bit because I was late to the party today, but I'm very interested. And a few years ago, as Lawrence mentioned, I was just bound and determined I was going to go sit among the sunflowers and do some painting. And I did find a place where I felt safe and nobody told me I shouldn't be there. But that would be a consideration if you're welcoming artists and photographers to let that word out amongst your community people that nobody should just infringe on your property without permission. And, you know, the friends that I paint with, we do not go where we haven't checked to see if people are all right with that. But maybe that would even be a thing, because to have access to a sunflower field isn't just, pull up and tromp in there. But it's a delightful thing to do. You get the bees buzzing around and you feel like you're out in the wilderness. And I did have a lot of fun with it. And we came up with some pretty good paintings too. Most of them I don't even own anymore. So time to start again.
Yeah, I think you might be able to paint a Chislic too, you know.
Well, I'd probably eat it before I got my palette set. So. My painting palette, my food palette would be set for Chislic.
You just got to take a picture of it first, and that way you can paint it afterwards.
Yeah,
right? That's the key piece.
Go ahead, Beth.
I definitely could find a sunflower field or 2 or 3 that that you could paint in.
Okay.
And yeah, so
why don't you exchange information in the chat, and then you can be in contact with.
Unfortunately, I can't figure out how to get to the chat from my phone. Sorry.
Okay.
If there's a way afterwards that I can email it to you or text it to somebody, I would love to do that. So, but all of our information is on the HighmoreSD.org. Or you can message us through the Highmore Area Council of the Arts that way too. So
I'll definitely be checking on those things. I'm glad that this is part of the Arts Council, because that throws the door more wide open for those of us who are in that mode of painting and art things.
Yeah.
Makes it feel right up our alley. Thank you.
Anyone else have any suggestions or questions about putting on festivals and bringing your community together? Anybody else?
I did notice a comment in the chat to highly recommend a Facebook event page, and I would definitely second that. We've had a lot of traction with our Facebook event page, and one of the cool things about creating an event page is they also give you a whole lot of behind-the-scenes analytics, so you can figure out exactly what type of demographic is your primary target for your festival, just based on hits on that page. We know that we apparently seem to resonate with people between the ages of 25 and 45 that are male in the state of South Dakota. Now, granted, we have hits from everyone, but that seems to be at least our most traveled demographic. I would say that we do spend a little bit of money making sure that we are on streaming services as ads, just so that people are seeing those as they're, rewatching Game of Thrones for the 50th time. They now pop up Chislic Festival right in the middle of that hour-long episode. And we make sure that we're all over Facebook. We also do a lot of area parades, Beth. And so I'm not sure as what happens around the Highmore area or cities that are around there, if they have, we're a little bit past 4th of July celebrations now, but, we know that for example, Danish Days is in Viborg, and they always have a parade around Danish Days. And so we make sure that we have a float in there, which is sometimes just my car with banners on it and a QR code where people can scan to get to our website on a 2x2 magnet. So that at least helps the visibility as people are already in festival mode. They're like, oh, Sunflower Festival. That'd also be cool. Add that to my calendar as well. So getting out there in front of people in parades is a fairly low lift, but definitely has been a pretty high yield for us. Just even as people talk about where they heard about us from. So, oh, I saw you in the Sioux Falls 4th of July parade. Not this year, but in previous years, I saw you in that parade and thought it was cool, so I came. Right? It's a pretty cool thing to do.
Mm-hmm. I see in the chat there are a number of comments relative to grants, and I think that there are some grants available. That said, when we started the Vinegar Museum and the Vinegar Festival, we did not apply for grants. We probably should have, but so I don't hold that as some kind of honor thing. But we didn't. But partly because we weren't really sure what we were doing. So we couldn't define it in the grant writing process. But I would like to encourage people that if you don't have grants, even if you're not a 501c3, don't let money be your master. It's just like find a way to do it. Like our first parade was kids on their tricycles and people with their dogs, and they ran down and they walked down the street, and that was our first Vinegar parade. But now it's grown, into like, tractor pulls and horses and all kinds of stuff, and still growing. I hope we'll get some ostriches and emus at some point to be in that parade. But yeah, it's a thing. Just keep doing it, whether you have the money or not. Just find a way. Jeremy, you were going to say something?
So you'll have to put together a petting zoo, Lawrence. That's what will have to happen. The next event at the Vinegar Festival. Get that together with
to do what?
Put together a petting zoo at the next festival.
Oh yeah. We have had a petting zoo. We did have a petting zoo.
Love that.
But finding the pets is harder than to find the kids who want to paint it, who want to pet the pets.
Always true.
Sharon,
we're always looking for new events and everything else to come to our festival too. I mean, starting from the first festival, we essentially had vendors, we had live music, and we had a kids zone that had inflatables. But as you look at this year's festival, we have a mutton run. So if you're into doing a 5K or a 1K walk or whatever, you can start at 8 o'clock in the morning in the Freeman area and do a mutton run. We have the kids zone that also has a storyteller this year. The Lions Club is bringing they have like kind of a bus that they travel around with that educates people on appropriate eye care and eye safety. That's coming. We have bingo, beanbags. There's a disc golf tournament for the first time this year. So as those things are able to grow, we found that if people don't necessarily want to come just because it's a meat festival, right? But they like to play disc golf. Well, that also gets them on the grounds, right? And gets them in front of our vendors. We know that if they, really like live comedy, that's something that we're going to have for the first time on stage. This year, we have 3 comedians that are going to tell jokes for an hour or so. They may come in that case. And so especially as you're looking to grow that festival, trying to figure out how to get more different events just to make sure that more people know about what you're doing is really important.
Right. Sharon, you were going to say something. And after you turn on your mic.
There's a maintenance man here, and I'm trying to catch you guys, the meeting, and also him. But the Sunflower Festival, is that like if I'm driving out from Minneapolis, are there motels I could stay in, or is it an overnight thing, or is it like 1 to 3 in the afternoon on the, Or do we go out into some farmer's field and or section line road and take a look at the flowers, or how does that go? I suppose I could wait until we get Zoom meeting is over and look up the Sunflower Festival.
Well, this is a good time for Beth to talk about it.
Beth, can you help me out?
Beth, yeah. Where can
Well,
people
it's
stay?
Well, I do have a couple rooms still available at the Hideout Bed and Breakfast. There, it's kind of what you want it to be. We do have, like I said, we have still. There's a photography workshop that starts on Friday and goes till Sunday. If you're interested in photography, you can sign up for that. That's a separate thing. There is the ability to go to a sunflower field and be in a sunflower field. There will be maps that have where the fields are. There'll be a festival in the park where there'll be vendors with different things, hopefully some educational things. We have a brand new swimming pool in that park too. You can kind of do whatever you want to learn about sunflowers, be in a field, go tour the sunflower plant over in Harold, which is 15 miles away. So it's more of an area. It's a bigger event than just in Highmore, because the fields are not in Highmore per se, they're out in the country. So you may have to drive around the area or along Highway 14. There's, we can't bring the fields to Highmore. So you may have to drive a little bit to see them.
Beth, can you guarantee that there will be flowers on the 9th through the 11th? Is the crop pretty well?
Well, we will know. The one thing about August and sunflowers, generally, if there isn't, the farmers plant their flowers at different times. They don't all get planted exactly the same time. So if one field is not ready, there's probably another field that will be ready. There's not just one producer, there's multiple producers. So I don't know exactly when my husband's a sunflower producer. I don't know exactly when his flowers will be ready. So, but they're probably, he plants multiple fields. So one field may not be ready, but a different field may be. So the week before, I will be driving around Hyde County finding where these fields are. So
I think Sharon's question also went to the availability of accommodations, and these are kind of things that come up in every kind of, well, especially like the case of Jeremy was talking about. They're looking at 4,000, now they get 7,000. Well, those, in addition to bathrooms, some people, as they come from further away, they so do you have like people who in your community, do you talk to your community about, well, who can spare a room and maybe make a couple of bucks on this, kind of like the motorcycle festival?
Right. Well,
it couldn't happen without people opening their homes.
Right. I mean, we do have, there is another motel in town, and we'll see what happens with this year. So far, I haven't gotten a ton of extra reservations, but that doesn't mean that won't happen. And we'll just see how it grows. The good thing is even if you can't come specifically on August 10th, if you came a few days before, you just maybe wouldn't see the activities, but I could still get you to a sunflower field, and I would still we would still take you out to a sunflower field if you came and stayed at the Hideout Bed and Breakfast. That's kind of what we do. My husband's a sunflower producer. We could get you to a field if it's in bloom, or we could find you a field that's in bloom. So this is just our way of promoting sunflowers.
Okay.
That would be great. Absolutely great, Beth. Is there any way we can, a person could contact you? I'm looking through the chat now.
We
have I have, like I said, our bed and breakfast is Hideout Bed and Breakfast. It's HY because it's Hyde County.
Right.
So we have a website and we have a Facebook page. So
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there
Yeah.
there are some links in the chat, and
Okay, thank you.
yeah, so if you go up to the top and there's a little three dots, if you click on those three dots, you can save the chat up at the top where there's an X and a little square with a arrow. At least that's the way it looks on my screen.
Mhm.
If you're on a phone, sometimes it doesn't come through as well, you know. I mean, or they place it at a different place. But anyway, it's somewhere in there, or you can cut and paste it if you can see it. Let's go back though to a conversation about community participation. A lot of things have, you know, the success of a lot of things has a lot to do with how much the community gets behind it, how much passion there is for people to say, hey, look, you know, this is our thing as opposed to those guys' things. What do you do to make people, to allow people to feel ownership of your festivals or your efforts? How do you encourage ownership of the community to your efforts?
You know,
Jeremy?
being fully transparent, that is a little bit of an issue that we sometimes have in Freeman, just because of the way that the festival was established the first year, just because of the way that, you know, certain vendors were included or not during the first year. That, you know, people have very strong emotions about some of those pieces, and unfortunately, even without intending to, you can sometimes burn a bridge. The nice thing about our festival, right, is that we are trying to be extremely inclusive of anyone within the Chislic circle. And so even if we have a fire department, for example, that doesn't want to serve beer after they did that one year, is there another fire department in a small town that would do that again? They can put a boot out, they can get donations, whatever they want to do. And so, you know, we were very fortunate within the first couple of years of the festival to, you know, have some help from our fire department in Freeman, but then that kind of became the fire department in Menno, that's still within the Chislic circle, but not within Freeman itself, and still trying to get other small communities to even own part of that festival. You know, we have the VFW every year taking care of our beanbag tournament. That's been a success for the past couple of years. But before that, it was the Pink Ladies in one of the small towns that unfortunately I can't remember at the moment. But it's trying to, as you mentioned, Lawrence, grow that sense of community and that sense of building. And it's another layer when you're going just beyond one small town, right? If Viborg is trying to grow Danish Days, they really have to get everybody in Viborg, you know, to get behind it. But if we're trying to grow a Chislic festival that represents the entire state, we also have to make sure that Scotland and Kaler and, you know, Menno and Marion and all of those just feel really included in that festival as well. And so trying to find those small pieces to bring them in has been a challenge, but we feel like, again, it's still a growth process and we're still working on it.
Can you talk about some of the strategies that you have or would like to employ to get more people to feel more passion about
Yeah, there
festivals?
has to be a reward, right? I think that, you know, as you think about, I'm asking you to give up 4 hours on your, you know, Saturday in July to stand in the heat and volunteer to hand out pops to people when they buy them. What do you get back from that? Right. We certainly did t-shirts for a while. We recognized volunteers, as last year in our fifth festival, we made it the year of the volunteers. So they actually all came up on stage and got recognized. We give them free food all day long. So they have access to air conditioning and free food whenever they need that. So we try to have that piece, but I still think back to a couple volunteers that we have, actually a physician kind of in that area, and his whole family have volunteered since the beginning. And they're one of the first ones to reach out, being like, hey, we can help all 8 hours during the day if you need us to, just put us wherever you want. They have grown that sense of community and actually have brought a lot of their friends with them. And so trying to grow those relationships and demonstrating the benefits is something that you have to do to get volunteers. Those relationships, though, are extremely important to form with people who are also influencers, right? I think back to a festival a couple years ago where, you know, we were pretty short on volunteers the day before getting everything set up. And so a call was made to the coach of the football team in Parker. And they suspended their practice at noon. The whole football team came over in cars and buses to the Chislic Festival and set everything up for us. right? That was just something that they did because Parker also felt that, hey, we're kind of in the Chislic circle too. We've got some Chislic in our town. A lot of people come over. We also help quite a bit with, the Turner County Fair, where some of our board members are kind of on both of those groups. And there was that sense of community. And so we were able to have them as volunteers. And of course, they were recognized quite heavily the day of, and that led to more funding for them later on. So it is a point of making sure that if you are trying to get an organization to be part of your festival, there's visibility. They're called out on stage via the mic as being or community an organization that's volunteered for you, just so they also get visibility and can reap those benefits too.
I understand that, unfortunately in our country, too many things are direct transactional. It's like you give me something, I give you something. And, unfortunately, we lost that part of our brain that says, hey, I'm all a part of this. And what I do for you, I'm doing for me. And you don't need to pay me anything because, we're all in this together. Somehow too much of that is lost. I'm just wondering, how do you bring that back? How do you in your community, before or whether or not there is a festival, what kinds of things are you doing, could you do to get the community to feel like that whole Chislic circle, that that we're all in this together, and to feel a sense of being ready to help when you can? How do you build that?
I think that's $1 million question, Lawrence. And if we could figure that out, we'd have a lot more festivals, wouldn't we? And we certainly have a number of volunteers that have been with us for years and years that don't have that transactional nature. They just want to help. They love helping. They love being part of the festival. And frankly, that gets them there. They can volunteer for 4 hours and still have their Chislic and soda or whatever they want at the end, right? And so when we have had that type of success, a lot of that has been just the people that and the relationships that you've driven. Because if I am just putting, which again, there's a post out right now on our Facebook page that, if you're listening to this before the festival and you want to volunteer at our festival, please reach out and do that. We always need more volunteers to help lessen the load and take that off. But that massive Facebook post out into the ether will probably get us a few volunteers, right? And people that want to do that. But me asking, friends I know are going to come to the festival anyway, hey, would you mind, giving a couple hours of your time? That's what gets people there. We're asking people in our community, hey, this has been really successful. We had 10,000 people coming in that day. For sure that your store is going to get a lot of traffic. Any of your employees that are off that day want to volunteer for our festival? I mean, they're also free to talk about your store downtown while they're, handing out beer or sodas to people. They can be like, oh, by the way, stop at the flower shop or stop at Fenzel's and Freeman. We allow that. That's fine. You don't have to just talk about us. So that, I think those relationship pieces are what really grow that. But how do we operationalize that on a very large scale? I think we're still learning how to do that and working on fine tuning that a bit.
Well, speaking of that, if you look at the festival, one of the big things that any festival does is bring people together, often who would not ever see each other. They know maybe each other exists, maybe they saw. Many times, especially like in a Chislic circle, there could be people that live not so far from you, but you've never had a chance that you can remember of ever seeing them. Festivals have a way of bringing people, making opportunities for new contacts. Do you have in place, or could you put in place, something to optimize the ability of people to interact with each other rather than sit, like stand or move around in their own little circles, missing the grand opportunity, to exercise what limited interpersonal skills they have? But that's how you grow it. Is there something in your planning that has been or could be used to take advantage of that opportunity?
No, I think that's a good point. One of the things that we've talked about, at least for the past couple of years, but it's never been operationalized, is a lot of fairs that go multiple days will certainly have a dinner the night before kickoff to have all the volunteers come together, and that's where you get your information packet, that's where you get your shirt, but you also have a couple hours of socialization with other people that are volunteering. And we've never done that. It's always come up a couple times, just as as we've had board discussions and how to increase volunteers, that is something that, we're looking at for future festivals. Unfortunately, too late to happen this year. But even doing events off season as well, we've talked about just having a Chislic competition. People can come together and just enjoy some local Chislic without, having to deal with a mess of 10,000 people at a festival. That definitely gets, the locals coming as well. So I think that, that evening before recognition of volunteers where you can socialize with others is a strong point, and something that we'll definitely have to look at for future festivals.
It would seem like that's a good way to grow your festivals too, because
Exactly.
if people make new friends at a festival, then it's more likely that they will be there the next year and maybe even bring somebody else, because,
Yeah.
once it becomes a tradition, that you meet so-and-so at that place, it becomes a thing.
Yeah, we have a group from Canada that's actually come down for our festival the past 2 or 3 years, because one of the people in their travel group came down, experienced the festival, thought that it was cool, told all their friends back in Canada, and now a group comes down from I think it's the greater Winnipeg area, so just north of us, not like they're coming from the way eastern or way western part of the state of the country, but yeah, they come down every single year to the festival now, just because they've developed that connection to our festival, they developed that socialization, and it's kind of just become a cool thing to do during the summer. So.
Well, we're getting down to the last few minutes, and Sharon looks like she's chomping at the bit to ask a question or something. Did you have a question, Sharon?
Well, I didn't. I'm just thinking about that Sunflower Festival, but there are a lot of Germans from Russia in that Winnipeg's area, so they might really connect with you for that reason.
Very true. Yeah, it's that cultural connection that brought them down.
Yeah, great. Beth, did you have any questions, or maybe you can crowdsource one of your issues that you're trying to solve with your new festival, or anything you want to add about your Sunflower Festival?
I just enjoy listening to Jeremy talk about the Chislic Festival and some of the things that they've done, and getting some of that input too. So this has been great for me also. So I appreciate that. And I am one of those Germans from Russia. That's where my grandparents came from, and that is my heritage too. So I appreciate that. So that's all I have. And come to the Sunflower Festival in August.
Well, Beth, if you want to come to our festival in July and you find me, I would be sure to walk you through all of the back back functions of that festival if you want to see what we do, because we definitely have there's a kind of a main building that we utilize as our command center, and a lot goes on in there just to make sure that festival is happy and happening. So
I might do that. We'll see.
That's fair.
That would be kind of like going behind Mount Rushmore, right?
It's your behind the scenes tour of
yeah, to see what they're doing back there.
That's right.
Well, I've been there too, so.
Love it.
Okay, so this has been great. I think that there's a lot more things that we could explore about getting communities to work together. I think these festivals are really a great opportunity to bring people together. You take, for example, like Betty was talking about, the artists who might come up. That would be, that would create a whole different, let's say, thing. And I think you could do that in the whether it's Sunflower or Chislic or any of these different things. If you have something that's beautiful in your area, especially if it relates to what you're doing. For example, sheep, they could be an interesting thing to paint if you can get them to stand still long enough. That could be an interesting addition. And other people who have things that are related to what you're doing, all of those people, and getting them together really could present some opportunities, not only for the Chislic Festival, but also for like the Sunflower Festival. They're just getting started. They'll have my experience is you have a lot of you kiss a lot of frogs before you get to a princess. So don't be too discouraged if it doesn't happen. But I like people to like see if you can just make it happen. You know, just what can you do to encourage people to come and help you. Thank you very much, Jeremy. And thank you very much, Beth, for joining us today. This has been a wonderful conversation. I want to invite everyone back next week, same time, same station, and we'll have more brainstorming, the human connection. Goodbye.